much money selling my first company that I was able to start Anduril without even, I mean, we had our first, like I bought our first building and a bunch of our first equipment, and everyone's first payroll was just out of my personal bank account. And I'm lucky enough that I had that advantage going into it. But like, when you talk about changing the system, let's think big picture, not just defense. The system, like capital T, capital S, like I'm not a part of your system, man, like that system. That system is extremely favorable to people who already have billions of dollars. Once you have billions of dollars, you can do anything. Like you really can. People say only in America, can you go from nothing to having a lot? But certainly, if you already have a lot in America, you can do even better.
But with all due respect, you didn't have.
Oh, when I did it my first time around.
When you were in your garage doing these things.
You
made your billion.
I started Oculus when I was 19 years old, living in a camper trailer, working a minimum wage job. So
right.
It's only in America that that can happen. But my second act, it's really exactly what you'd expect from a billionaire. And so the point that I say is the system needs to, the change it really needs is not to allow people like me post-billionaire status to be successful. The system's fine with us.
Yeah.
What we need to do is figure out how the system can work with the 19-year-old Palmer Luckey. How can the people who are having great ideas, building incredible things that are 19 years old, working a minimum wage job, how can those guys get adopted? And our country used to have this muscle. We used to know how to find those people and lift them from small company to major part of our defense apparatus. Sam Colt was about to go bankrupt, working out of the back of a wagon, building revolvers by hand. He got an order from the Texas Rangers that turned into an evaluation with the U.S. Army, and then in his lifespan, he armed the entire Western world with hundreds of millions of firearms. I mean, imagine that. You go from building revolvers one by one out of a wagon to arming the entire free world. I mean, it's just, it's incredible. And there's no stories like that recently.
I know, but I will tell you, and you're a, if I may say so, you're just like a real humble, normal guy. But I will tell you, and I think you would all agree with me, I wish more billionaires or millionaires had this patriotic fervor that you do to serve the country, to help our military, and to protect our country.
I agree. I'm in this group chat called the B-Boys Club, and it's for boys who've sold their companies for at least $1 billion. The B-Boys.
I'm not in that chat. I don't know why.
It's not in that chat.
I don't know, man.
But there's a bunch of guys in there who, some of them are doing new things. A lot of them are, cruising the Mediterranean on their new yacht. And I've been trying to shame people for years. I'm saying, what are you doing? Like you could do anything. Shouldn't you look at this a little bit like being a superhero? Don't you have a responsibility that comes with your great power? And some of them agree, some of them don't. I think some of them, in realizing they're not going to be able to make money in the Chinese market after all, have tidied up their point of view and have suddenly become zealots for American exceptionalism on the global stage. And I like it when people come to the right conclusion for the right reasons, but I will accept people who come to the right conclusion for the wrong reasons. They're powerful allies, and so I agree. I wish we had more people who are getting into this, and I think that Ukraine has helped. I think what's happened in Israel has helped. I think there's a lot of people who have started to realize.
Understand the importance, right? And yeah. So speaking of that, of your vision, your mission, Anduril's mission is, correct me if I'm wrong, to rebuild the arsenal of democracy, right? So what does that phrase mean to you personally? Because I know that to you this is not a cliche. This is real. What does it mean to you?
I am a classical Reagan-style peace through strength advocate. You need to have a credible threat of, look, I don't say this lightly, you need a credible threat of violence to be on the table for any other form of diplomacy or negotiation to work. People who say well, we should really engage in diplomacy here. We should really try to use economic levers, cultural levers, social levers. Those levers are much more effective when you have a specter lurking in the background for the bad guys to consider. And it also works better with our allies when you have that same specter on their side, when they know that you're going to be working towards their interests and to keep them safe. I've been saying for a few years now that the United States has been in a transitioning role, I think, not as the world police, but as the world gun store. Right? I think the days of us sending hundreds of thousands of people overseas to die for other people's countries, I think they will largely come to an end. And we can instead focus on, arming these people with the tools they need to fight for themselves, and then assisting in a capacity that hopefully minimizes the loss of life on the part of the United States Armed Forces. And when we talk about rebuilding the arsenal of democracy, we mean this in a very real, practical sense. You need to literally build lots of arms. If you are going to be the world's gun store, if your diplomacy is going to be underpinned by this promise that we will be there for you, that we are going to give you the tools you need to actually be able to back that up. Imagine a gun store that has no stock. Imagine a gun store that has a couple things on the shelf, and then the moment a minor conflict breaks out, it runs out, and you're not able to sell to anyone anymore. That is the position that a lot of our allies have seen come true because of Ukraine, because of Israel, and they look and say, well, the United States can claim they're going to help us all they want, but we know they can't make enough artillery shells. We know they can't make enough missiles. We know they can't make enough aircraft. We know that U.S. war games, our own war games, show that we would run out of almost all of our critical precision munitions in a week or so of real conflict. Well, what do you do on day 100? What do you do on day 1,000 of that conflict? What do you do when China has literally 350 times more shipbuilding capacity than we do? Like, it's almost unfathomable. You can't think that. I wish I could put a chart up here. The problem is the charts, they're almost impossible to communicate. Like, if I were to put the number of ships that we could build in a military conflict with the shipyards we have, and I put, a few dozen ships on a board, the Chinese equivalent is thousands of ships. They're just single pixel dots on the screen. You can't even tell that it's a chart. It's an extraordinarily bad situation we're in if we don't have an arsenal that can underpin our democracy and the ones that we support around the world.
And without that, diplomacy never works, and
that's right.
It all becomes a empty, hollow, right?
Well, this is what everyone said pre-Ukraine invasion. I mean, I've been saying that the last 2 years have been the Palmer Luckey I told you so tour. Because when I started Anduril, there were a lot of people that some people believed to be intelligent, who believed in this concept at the end of history. It's like people who always think the world is about to end, except the opposite. They think the world can never end. They think the moment they live in is the first time in history that peace is forever, that war is over, that economic ties preclude any sort of large-scale conflict.
There are no thugs around the world. There are no evil.
They think that nicely worded but stern letters in the United Nations are going to stop the bad guys. And the problem is that these are people who look at a peace that was built by massive, overwhelming threat of force. And then they live in the world that came out of that and say, oh, well, this is just how things are now. No, you have to look at how we got there and realize that human nature does not suggest that we will be so lucky as to be the first people to live in a time with nobody who wants what that guy over there has. I mean, how long has that been going on?
Ever.
Yeah, tens of thousands of years, hundreds of thousands, and millions of years. Forever.
Everywhere.
As long as someone had a better rock, as long as someone had anything that someone wanted, someone's been going over there and fighting him for it. And we can try to be better than that, but we can't count on everybody else to do it.
Yeah. No, and
I have to point out too, when I started Anduril, I struggled to raise money. And a lot of, these are smart people, supposedly, saying, oh, Palmer, you're so naive. There were people who thought that what we were doing was wrong. And to be clear, not like, oh, it was wrong because it was AI. It was just literally because we were building weapons of any kind at all. They said, what you're doing is at worst immoral and unethical and evil.
That's
But at best, the most charitable interpretation we got from most investors was, oh, you're so naive. You see, these tools are not needed anymore. Why would you waste your talent, your money, and your time building things? All you're really doing is, is fear mongering. You're just trying to get people to give you money for fear. And I mean, I won. So let's see, Bloomberg called us the most controversial company in tech when we were founded, which was amazing because we were like 24 people. And this was the year that like WeWork was under federal indictment. Uber had just ousted their CEO. Like Mark Zuckerberg was getting raked over the coals for a variety of.
But you were the most controversial company.
But somewhere we're the most controversial.
That's
Why? Because we're doing something for our national security. Wired magazine, I got their worst person in Silicon Valley award, which was very funny because I wasn't even in Silicon Valley anymore. I got out of that place fast. I went back to Orange County, California, where I started Oculus. But I mean, I know I'm dwelling on it too much, but it bears highlighting just how much of a vibe shift there has been. And I, on the one hand, I'm glad everyone seems to be coming around to my way of thinking. On the other, it sucks that it had to happen on the backs of major conflicts proving everybody wrong, because if they would have come to this conclusion earlier, they would have been there with me, and maybe we wouldn't be so fucked.
Yeah. Well, yeah. You mentioned President Reagan, and to paraphrase him, he once said, "No country has ever been attacked because the enemy thought you were too weak." No, too strong. Strong, powerful countries. That's how you stop wars. That's how wars don't.
Looking at it from the other angle, wars are started by countries that disagree as to who will win. Right? If there's disagreement between the parties, war is possible. It's extremely rare for a war to start when both parties have an opinion as to who will win and are aligned in that opinion.
That's right.
And the people will point out, and I can already see the people on Twitter or X saying, but Palmer, what about this extremist group? What about this country? It is true, there are irrational actors. There are some people who believe they can win by losing. Every guy who's ever put on a suicide vest thought he could win by losing.